Good morning, good evening, wherever you're listening from. I believe this is a divine moment. You're not here by accident. You didn't just stumble across this message. I believe God is about to speak to your heart in a powerful way. The title today is Trusting God's Ways. And I believe that when you truly learn to trust God's way, even when you don't understand it, your life should change in ways you never imagined. Let me ask you something. Have you ever prayed for something, waited, believed, and then nothing happened? You were sure it was right. You were ready. But doors stayed closed, people walked away, and opportunities didn't work out. Friend, can I tell you something? Just because it's not happening your way doesn't mean it's not happening God's way. Have you ever looked back at something you really wanted, maybe a relationship, a job, a move, or even a dream, and thank God it didn't work out the way you planned it? At the time, you were heartbroken. You were frustrated, maybe even angry with God. You didn't understand why things didn't fall into place. But later, with the benefit of hindsight, you realized God was protecting you all along. That's the beauty of God's ways. They're not our ways. His head is so much bigger, so much better, and so much wiser than anything we could come up with on our own. Isaiah 55:9 says it perfectly. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. What does that mean in everyday life? It means God sees the beginning and the end. We only see the moment we're in. Let me give you a real life picture. Imagine a child wanting to eat candy for dinner. That child doesn't understand nutrition or long-term health. All they know is, this tastes good right now. But a loving parent says no, not because they're mean, but because they see what that child doesn't see. They see cavities, sugar crashes, and long-term habits being formed. That's how God works with us. We ask him for things that feel good in the moment. But he knows the full picture, and in love, he sometimes says no or not yet. I remember hearing a woman talk about how she prayed for a promotion at her job. She had worked so hard, she was qualified, and everything seemed aligned. But when the time came, they gave the position to someone else. She was crushed. She questioned God. She even said, "Lord, I thought you loved me. I did everything right." But a few months later, the company went through a major downsizing, and the person who got that job was one of the first to be laid off. That rejection wasn't rejection, it was protection. God's plan was higher. You see, we live in the moment, but God lives in eternity. He's not just trying to get you through the week, he's setting you up for your destiny. You're praying for comfort, but he's preparing you for calling. You're asking him to remove the obstacle, but he's using that very obstacle to build your character. His plan doesn't just include your wants, it includes your growth, your impact, and your future. Sometimes the very things that break our hearts are the same things God uses to build our faith. You didn't get into the school you applied for only to later find out the school you did get into brought the relationships, the growth, and the opportunities you never saw coming. You didn't marry the person you thought was the one, but now you're in a healthier, stronger relationship that's God ordained. That's not luck, that's the higher plan of a God who loves you. And can I tell you something? God's plan doesn't just work in the highlights, it works in the hardships too. Even in pain, even in loss, even in unanswered prayers, God's fingerprints are all over your story. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him." Notice it says all things, not just the good things. That means even the divorce, even the job loss, even the betrayal, God can use it all for your good. He doesn't waste anything. I love the story of Joseph in the Bible. Here's a man who was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If anyone had a reason to question God's plan, it was Joseph. But years later, Joseph ends up second in command of all Egypt. When he finally reunites with his brothers, he says something so powerful: "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." That's the kind of God we serve. He takes what the enemy meant to harm you, and he uses it to position you. So maybe today you're in the middle of something you don't understand. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've believed, and still things haven't gone your way. Friend, this is where faith comes in. Faith is not just trusting when it's easy, it's trusting when it's confusing, trusting when doors close, trusting when it's quiet, trusting when nothing is going according to plan. Because when you can't trace his hand, you can trust his heart. Let go of the need to control every detail. Stop demanding answers to every why. and start resting in the truth that your God is not winging it. He's not reacting to circumstances. He's orchestrating them. He's not surprised by what's happening in your life. He's already written the next chapter. And I promise you, when you finally see what he's been doing behind the scenes, you'll say, thank you, Lord, for not giving me what I thought I wanted. Thank you for something better. So today, take a deep breath, release the pressure, and say this out loud: God, I trust your plan. Even when I don't understand it, I know it's better than mine. Because his ways are higher and he's leading you somewhere greater than you can imagine. 2/2. Have you ever been driving somewhere with your GPS guiding the way, and all of a sudden you hear that voice say, we're calculating, maybe there's traffic ahead, maybe a road is closed, or maybe you just missed a turn. Whatever the reason, your route changes. But here's the thing, the GPS to say, well, that's it, you're never getting there now. No, it simply redirects you. It finds another path to get you to your destination. That, my friend, is how God works. Life is full of detours, times when the path you were on suddenly changes. You thought you'd be married by now, but you're still waiting. You thought you'd be running your own business, but you're stuck in a job you don't love. You thought you'd be living your dream, but life looks nothing like what you imagined. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like you've missed your chance, that maybe God has forgotten about you. But can I tell you something powerful? Detours are still part of the journey. God doesn't just work through the direct routes. He works just as powerfully, sometimes even more powerfully, through the detours. Those unexpected twists, those disappointments, those delays, they are not wasted time. They are divine redirections. Think about Moses. God told him he would lead the people of Israel out of slavery and into the promised land. But before he ever stood before Pharaoh, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness shepherding sheep. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't wasted time. It was preparation. God used the wilderness to humble Moses, to shape his character, to prepare his heart. That detour wasn't punishment, it was training ground. In our lives, we tend to think of detours as setbacks. But what if they're actually setups? What if the place you're in right now, though it feels off course, is exactly where God wants to grow something in you? Maybe patience, maybe endurance, maybe compassion or wisdom or faith. You see, God is more interested in who you're becoming than how fast you get there. Sometimes we pray for growth and then complain about the process. We ask God to use us in a big way and then get frustrated when we're not promoted immediately. But what if the delay is the development? What if God is saying, I'm not taking you the short route because you're not just going to arrive, you're going to thrive when you get there. I heard a story about a young man who applied for a prestigious college program. He was qualified, passionate, everyone thought he was a shoo-in. But he didn't get accepted. He was devastated. But instead of giving up, he took a gap year and volunteered overseas. That year completely changed him. It opened his heart, gave him a new perspective, and deepened his purpose. When he eventually applied again, not only was he accepted, he knew exactly why he was there. That detour didn't delay his destiny, it defined it. You see, the path God takes you on may not make sense to others. It may not even make sense to you, but God never wastes a step. Even in the wilderness, even in the waiting room, even when you feel like you've been passed over, he is working. You might be thinking, but I made mistakes. I caused my own detour. Maybe you walked away from God for a season. Maybe you ignored his voice. Can I encourage you? Even your mistakes can't stop his mercy. Even your wrong turns don't cancel his promise. God is not standing at your last failure shaking his head. No, he's already working on a new route to bring you back to purpose. That's grace. Romans 8:28 reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Not some things, not just the good parts, all things. That means even your detours. Even your regrets. Even the years that feel like a waste, God can use them for good. So what should you do when you're on a detour? Keep trusting. Keep showing up. Keep doing the next right thing. Don't rush the process. Don't despise the slow seasons, because often it's in the slow detours that God does his deepest work. It's where he builds the foundation strong enough to carry the weight of the blessings ahead. When you feel stuck, remember this: you may be delayed, but you're not denied. God hasn't changed his mind about your future. The road may be winding, but the destination is still the same. And when you finally arrive and look back and say, thank you, God, for every detour, you knew exactly what you were doing. So today, stop resenting the detour Embrace it. Learn from it. Let it shape you, because you are still on the journey, and the journey, detours and all, is leading you to your destiny. If you've been waiting on something from God, really waiting, then you know it can be one of the hardest parts of your faith walk. Maybe you've been waiting on a healing, a financial breakthrough, a relationship, a dream job, or a door to open that seems permanently shut. The longer it takes, the easier it becomes to wonder, God, did you forget about me? Did you change your mind? But let me encourage you today with this truth: a delay is not a denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. God's timing is not just good, it's perfect. One of the biggest challenges we face is reconciling God's promises with our present circumstances. We read scriptures that say God has plans to prosper us, to give us a future and a hope. And yet, here we are waiting. But that's where faith kicks in. Faith is not proven in the easy moments. It's forged in the waiting room. It's developed when you keep believing even when nothing is changing. If you've been waiting on something from God, really waiting, then you know it can be one of the hardest parts of your faith walk. Maybe you've been waiting on a healing, a financial breakthrough, a relationship, a dream job, or a door to open that seems permanently shut. The longer it takes, the easier it becomes to wonder, God, did you forget about me? Did you change your mind? But let me encourage you today with this truth: a delay is not a denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. God's timing is not just good, it's perfect. One of the biggest challenges we face is reconciling God's promises with our present circumstances. We read scriptures that say God has plans to prosper us, to give us a future and a hope. And yet, here we are waiting. But that's where faith kicks in. Faith is not proven in the easy moments. It's forged in the waiting room. It's developed when you keep believing even when nothing is changing. Let's be real, waiting seasons can be painful. They test your patience, your endurance, your attitude. But they are not empty seasons. In fact, they are some of the most sacred, fruitful, and necessary seasons in your life. God uses the wait to prepare you for what He's already prepared for you. Think of a woman who is expecting a baby. She doesn't find out she's pregnant and have the baby the next day. No, there's a process, 9 months of waiting. But is that delay a denial? Of course not. It's necessary. During that time, the baby is forming, organs are developing, bones are strengthening. That delay is actually a divine period of preparation. If you try to rush it, it can cause damage. The same is true with the promises of God. Rushing what isn't ready can rob you of what's best. In John chapter 11, we read the story of Lazarus. His sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was sick. They were close to Jesus, surely they thought he would come immediately. But Jesus waited. 2 days passed before he even started the journey, and by the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. From the outside, it looked like Jesus was late. But what they didn't know was that Jesus wasn't preparing for a healing, he was preparing for a resurrection. The delay wasn't a denial. It was a setup for something greater. You may feel like you're in a Lazarus moment. You prayed, but nothing changed. You believe, but the answer hasn't come. Can I remind you? Sometimes God waits so that when He moves, it will be undeniable that it was Him, not your effort, not your connections, not your resources. He waits so that the testimony is even bigger, even louder, even more miraculous. If God had answered your prayer when you wanted it, maybe it wouldn't have been as impactful. But when He answers His way, it brings glory that reaches far beyond your situation. Let me give you a modern example. A young man I know had a dream to start his own business. He had the plan, the passion, the skills, but he kept hearing no. Investors turned him down. Banks refused the loan. Doors kept closing. For 2 years, he felt stuck. But during that time, he learned more, saved more, refined his business model. And finally, when the opportunity came, it wasn't just good, it was perfect. He didn't just launch a company, he launched it debt-free, with clarity and confidence he never would have had 2 years earlier. That delay built the foundation that's still holding him up today. You see, God knows what's on the other side of your wait. He knows what you need to handle what you're praying for. Sometimes the delay is because you're ready, but the blessing isn't. Other times the blessing is ready, but you're not. And occasionally, God's delaying you to protect you from something you can't see right now. Think about that. You're praying for the door to open, and God is saying, I see danger on the other side. I'm not saying no, I'm saying not yet. You're asking for the relationship to work out. But God is saying, I'm protecting your heart. You don't see what I see. That delay might be the very evidence of his love. Don't let a season of waiting become a breeding ground for doubt. Let it become a training ground for trust. Keep showing up, keep praising, keep believing. The enemy would love nothing more than for you to give up 5 minutes before your miracle. But if you'll stay faithful in the delay, you'll step into the fulfillment at the exact right time. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good. For at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Not just some time, the proper time. That means God already has the date circled on his calendar. Your job is to trust him until you get there. So if you're waiting, lift your head. You're not forgotten. You're not forsaken. And you're not being denied. You are simply being prepared for something greater than you imagined. Hold on. Keep the faith. Because when God shows up, it won't just be on time. It'll be right on time. We love having a plan, don't we? We like knowing what's next, how it's going to happen. And when it's going to happen, we crave security. We want details. We want clarity before we move. But have you noticed? God doesn't always work that way. He often gives us just enough light for the step we're on. And he invites us to trust him with the rest. Because it's in the unknown, not in the comfortable, that trust is truly born. If we had all the answers, if we could see the full map of our lives, we wouldn't need to trust God. We'd lean on our own understanding. But God isn't calling us to live by sight. He's calling us to live by faith. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. That verse doesn't say, trust the Lord once you understand. It says, don't lean on your understanding at all. That's hard to do in real life because we're wired to want answers. When the doctor says we need to run more tests, our mind starts spinning. When a relationship ends with no explanation, we replay every moment trying to make sense of it. When a door closes that we were sure God opened, we ask, why, Lord? And often heaven is silent. But here's the truth. Trust doesn't require answers. It requires surrender. And that surrender is cultivated in the places where we feel lost, uncertain, or out of control. Think about Abraham. God told him, go to a land I will show you. He didn't give him a map. He didn't say, take this route and you'll arrive in 3 days. No, he said, go. And Abraham had to obey with no idea what the destination looked like. He had to walk by faith, step by step into the unknown. And because he did, Abraham became the father of many nations. But it all started with trusting God in the dark. We want God to show us the finish line before we start running. But God says, if you'll just start moving, I'll guide you as you go. Trust isn't built by seeing every detail. It's built when we walk forward without them. Maybe you're in an unknown right now. Maybe you don't know what's next for your career, your finances, your family. Maybe life feels like you're driving through fog. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. Can I encourage you? Just because you can't see the path doesn't mean God isn't guiding it. He's in the fog. He's in the silence. He's in the waiting. He's in the places that feel unclear and uncertain. A woman once shared how she lost her job unexpectedly. It was a job she loved, and the layoff came out of nowhere. She panicked. She had bills, responsibilities, and no plan B. She cried out to God, what do I do now? But for weeks, she heard nothing. No big revelation. No booming voice from heaven. Just quiet. But in that quiet, she kept praying. She kept applying. She kept showing up. And one day, out of the blue, a friend mentioned a job opening. It wasn't something she had ever considered before, but she applied. Not only did she get it, but that job turned out to be more fulfilling, more flexible, and more in line with her gifts than the one she lost. She said later, if I hadn't walked through that unknown, I never would have found this purpose. You see, the unknown isn't a void. It's a classroom. It's where God teaches you to trust his character over your circumstances. It's where he shows you that he's faithful even when you feel like you're walking blind. It's where he reminds you that he's not just the God of the destination, he's the God of the journey. I think of Peter stepping out of the boat in the middle of the storm. He didn't wait for the sea to calm down. He didn't ask Jesus for a bridge. No, he stepped into the unknown with nothing but trust. And as long as his eyes were on Jesus, he walked on water. The moment he looked at the waves, he started to sink. Isn't that like us? When we fix our eyes on Jesus, we can walk through uncertainty with peace. But when we focus on the circumstances, we sink into fear. God never promised the road would always be clear. But he did promise he'd never leave us. He promised that his word would be a lamp to our feet, not a floodlight for the whole highway. A lamp shows you one step at a time. That means we walk by faith, not by full understanding. So what do you do when you're in the unknown? You keep trusting. You keep worshiping. You keep walking. Even when it doesn't make sense, even when it feels scary. Because every step you take in faith is a seed planted for your future. And one day you'll look back and say, now I see why that had to happen the way it did. Now I see what God was doing all along. Today, if you're in the dark, if you're unsure about tomorrow, you can still rest knowing God is already there. He's not confused, he's not late, and he's not done. Let the unknown be where your trust grows deep, because God always reveals his faithfulness on the other side of uncertainty. One of the most difficult seasons in life is when it feels like heaven has gone quiet. You've prayed the prayers, you've stood in faith, you've quoted the promises, and yet silence. No answer, no shift, just stillness. And in that silence, the enemy loves to whisper lies like God has forgotten you. He's not listening. Maybe you missed your chance. Maybe he changed his mind. But hear this loud and clear today. God's silence doesn't mean his absence. Just because you don't feel him doesn't mean he's not with you. Have you ever taken a test in school? During the test, the teacher doesn't talk. The room is quiet, not because the teacher isn't there, not because they've abandoned you, but because it's time for you to use what you've already been taught. The silence is a part of the process, and many times in life, God will seem silent not to punish you, but to grow you. There's a story in the Bible that speaks powerfully to this. In Mark chapter 4, Jesus tells his disciples, let's go to the other side. So they all get into the boat. But halfway across the sea, a massive storm hits. Waves crashing, wind howling. And where is Jesus? Asleep in the boat. Now imagine being one of those disciples. Water is flooding in. The boat is rocking violently. They're doing everything they can just to survive. And Jesus, who has the power to stop the storm, is asleep, silent. They finally wake him up and say, teacher, don't you care if we drown? Isn't that how we feel sometimes? God, don't you care that I'm hurting, that I'm scared, that I'm overwhelmed? But Jesus stands up, speaks to the storm, and everything becomes calm. Then he looks at them and says, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Here's the key. Before the storm ever began, Jesus said, let's go to the other side. He didn't say, let's go halfway and sink. He didn't say, let's go out there and die in a storm. He said, let's go to the other side. That was the promise. And even when he was silent, even when he was asleep, his word was still working. His presence was still there. And they still made it to the other side. God's promises don't expire when things get hard. His silence doesn't cancel what he said. And just like with the disciples, he's in your boat even if he seems quiet right now. A woman I once met had been praying for her son who had walked away from his faith. For years she prayed, years, and there were no signs of change, no signs of progress. In fact, things seemed to get worse. And in those silent years, she told me, I started to wonder if God even heard me. But she kept praying, kept trusting, kept showing up in faith. And then one day, after nearly a decade, her son came back to Christ. Not just as a believer, but now as a passionate leader in his church. She said, looking back, I see that even in the silence, God was moving behind the scenes. That's the truth. God is always doing more than you can see. Just because the answer hasn't come yet doesn't mean he's inactive. He may be aligning people, orchestrating events, and preparing hearts in ways that would blow your mind if you saw it all. But he calls you to trust him, not just in the breakthrough, but in the silence before it. It's in those quiet moments that your faith matures, that your roots go deep, that your relationship with God grows from convenience to conviction. Anybody can trust God when the blessings are flowing. But can you trust him when you can't hear him? Can you trust that he's still good, still in control, still worthy of your worship? Isaiah 45:15 says, truly you are a God who hides himself. Not because he's cruel, but because sometimes he wants us to seek him more intentionally. Sometimes he hides to be found, not found in feelings, not found in signs, but found in faith. Maybe right now you're walking through a silent season. You're not hearing much. You're not feeling much, but you're still here, still showing up, still believing. And that, my friend, is a powerful kind of trust. That's the kind of trust that builds resilience. That forms unshakable faith, that invites the presence of God in ways feelings never could. I want to encourage you, don't mistake silence for absence. Don't let the quietness of this season make you question the goodness of your God. He is closer than you think. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Even in the silence, he's whispering, "I've got you. I'm working. Just trust me." When a seed is planted in the ground, there's a season of silence before anything breaks through the soil. But that silence isn't death, it's development. Roots are growing. Strength is being built. And in due time, that seed will sprout. Your breakthrough is coming. The silence won't last forever. But while you wait, worship. While you wait, trust. While you wait, believe that even in the quiet, your God is moving mountains you can't see yet. Because he's never truly silent, he's always working behind the scenes, preparing you for the miracle ahead. When we go through life, we often see only what's right in front of us, what's happening today, this week, this month. We experience the pain, the confusion, the unanswered questions, and from our limited point of view, it can feel like nothing is making sense. Things fall apart that we thought would last forever. Doors slam shut that we were sure God opened. People walk away. Plans break down. And in those moments, it's so tempting to ask God, why is this happening? What are you doing? But here's a truth you can hold on to. God sees the bigger picture. What looks like a setback to you is part of a much larger masterpiece that he's painting with your life. Have you ever watched an artist work up close? If you get too close to the canvas, all you see are brushstrokes, random colors, sharp edges, little smudges that don't seem to make any sense. But if you step back, all of a sudden you see what those individual strokes were creating. A beautiful landscape, a detailed portrait, a breathtaking story. That's how God works in your life. The things you're facing may not look beautiful right now. They may feel messy, confusing, and even painful, but when God steps back, he sees how it all fits together. He's painting something greater than you could ever imagine. Sometimes we think the hard moments disqualify us. The failed relationship, the closed business, the diagnosis, the disappointment. We think this wasn't part of the plan. God must have taken his hand off me. But can I tell you something? Those very moments, those hard, unexpected, sometimes heartbreaking moments can become the very places God uses to show his power, his grace, and his purpose. Nothing in your life is wasted. Not even the pain, not even the silence, not even the detour. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He had a dream as a young man that he would lead, that he would be in a position of power. But before that dream ever came to pass, he was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For years, his life looked like a series of unfortunate events, but behind the scenes, God was weaving a bigger picture. Every betrayal, every delay, every injustice, God was using it to position Joseph exactly where he needed to be. And when the time was right, Joseph went from the prison to the palace. He didn't just fulfill the dream, he saved an entire nation during famine. Joseph later said to his brothers, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." That's the perspective that comes when you realize God sees more than you do. You may not understand what God is doing in your life right now. You may feel like you're stuck in the middle of your story. But trust that the author knows the ending. He knows what's ahead. He sees every chapter. And he's not just writing something random, he's writing something redemptive. I knew a woman who went through a painful divorce after decades of marriage. She was heartbroken, confused, and didn't understand how her life could unravel like that. She cried out to God, "Why would you let this happen?" For a long time, she didn't hear an answer. But in that season of brokenness, she found a strength she didn't know she had. She started volunteering, then leading women's groups, then mentoring others walking through loss. Today, she's one of the most powerful voices of healing in her community, not in spite of her pain, but because of it. Looking back, she told me I would have never chosen this path. But I see now how God used it to lead me into my purpose. That's what happens when you trust that God sees the bigger picture. You stop trying to make everything make sense in the moment and start believing that one day it will. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Not in some things, all things, even the heartbreak, even the mistake, even the years you thought were wasted. God is a master of using what the enemy meant for harm and turning it for good. Sometimes, when we go through hard seasons, we feel like God's forgotten us. But the truth is, He's often positioning us for something greater. The job you lost. Maybe He's making room for something better. The person who walked away? Maybe God is protecting you from something you can't see yet, the closed door. Maybe it's redirecting you to something far more fulfilling. We don't always get the full picture in the moment, but we don't have to, because we trust the one who holds the brush. He knows what He's doing. His perspective is higher. His timing is perfect. His plan is always bigger than ours. So if life feels confusing today, if you're in a place that doesn't make sense, take a deep breath and remember God is not finished. The picture is still being painted. The story is still unfolding. And one day you'll look back and see that every moment had meaning. Every tear had purpose. Every detour led somewhere beautiful. Because God, the master artist, never wastes a stroke. And He sees what you can't see yet. One of the greatest challenges in our faith journey is dealing with delays. We pray for something, believe with all our hearts, stay faithful, and then wait, and wait, and wait some more. Sometimes it feels like the answer is never coming. The temptation in those moments is to think that God has said no. But friend, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. Delay is not denial. God's silence or slowness doesn't mean He has forgotten you. It may just mean He's preparing something far greater than you imagined. We live in a fast-paced world. We're used to instant messages, instant meals, same-day delivery. We expect God to move like a microwave, fast and convenient. But God doesn't operate on our clock. He moves according to His timing, which is always perfect. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." Sometimes God delays not to punish us, but to prepare us. If He gave us what we were asking for right now, we might not be ready to handle it. The blessing could overwhelm us instead of bless us. God is more interested in building your character than delivering comfort. He wants to shape you into someone who can carry the weight of the destiny He's placed on your life. Think about the story of Lazarus in John chapter 11. Lazarus was sick, and his sisters Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus. Now, Jesus loved this family deeply, but instead of rushing to heal Lazarus, Jesus waited. He delayed His arrival for 2 more days. By the time He got there, Lazarus was already dead and buried. Martha said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." That's how we feel sometimes, isn't it? God, if you had just moved sooner, if you had answered quicker, but Jesus had something greater in mind. He wasn't just going to heal Lazarus. He was going to resurrect him. The delay was part of the plan. And because of it, more people believed, more glory was given to God, and a deeper revelation of Christ's power was revealed. God's delays are often divine setups for something more powerful than we expected. Let me share a real-life example. There was a man who had a dream of starting his own business. He worked hard, had a clear vision, even had investors ready. But every time he tried to move forward, something would fall through. Contracts would get delayed. People would back out. The dream always seemed just out of reach. He began to question, maybe this isn't meant to be. Maybe I missed God's voice. But he kept trusting. He kept preparing behind the scenes. He refined his vision, learned more about the industry, and deepened his relationship with God in the waiting. 5 years later, yes, 5 years a new door opened. This time everything aligned. The timing, the people, the resources, not only did the business launch successfully, but it thrived beyond his wildest dreams. Looking back, he said, if it had happened 5 years earlier, I wouldn't have been ready. The delay felt like a detour, but it was really God's protection and preparation. That's what delay often is, divine protection. What feels like a closed door may be God saying, not yet. I've got something better. You just can't see it yet. When David was anointed king of Israel, he didn't take the throne the next day. He went back to the pasture. He continued serving. He went through battles, betrayal, hiding in caves. It was years before the promise was fulfilled. But every delay shaped him, matured him, and prepared him to be the kind of king God wanted. Sometimes you're in the waiting room because the promise requires patience. And patience isn't passive. It's active trust. It's continuing to pray, continuing to believe, continuing to speak life even when the door hasn't opened yet. Don't let the delay make you settle. Don't let it convince you that God has forgotten. His word says in Habakkuk 2:3, though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. That means it may not come when you want it, but it will come when it's best, when it's mature, when you're ready. and when it will bring the most glory to God. Delay is not the end. Delay is not defeat. Delay is often the soil where your roots grow deeper. It's where you learn to trust God, not just for the blessing, but in the waiting. It's where your faith gets tested and strengthened. And when the promise finally arrives, it won't be premature. It will be perfectly timed. So if you're waiting today on a healing, a breakthrough, a relationship, a dream, don't give up. Don't lose heart. God is still writing your story. The delay doesn't mean the dream is dead. It might just mean he's building something greater than you could imagine. Because when the time is right, what once seemed impossible will suddenly make perfect sense. Keep trusting. Delay is not denial. It's just God saying, hold on, something better is coming. In a world full of noise, pressure, and uncertainty, peace can feel like a distant dream. We wake up with to-do lists longer than our energy levels. We're bombarded with bad news, overwhelmed by bills, deadlines, expectations. We carry the weight of our families, our futures, our fears. And often we wonder, will everything be okay? Will it work out? But here's the truth you need to anchor your heart to. Peace doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from trusting the one who does. When you learn to trust God's ways, his timing, his plan, you unlock a peace that the world cannot give and circumstances cannot take away. Jesus said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." That's not just a comforting quote, it's a divine promise. And it's activated through trust. You see, peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of God in the middle of the storm. Peace is not when everything goes right, it's when your heart is right even when everything seems wrong. Imagine a child on a roller coaster with their parent. The ride is twisting and turning, going up and down, and from the child's point of view, it might feel scary and unpredictable. But that child is gripping their parent's hand tightly. Even though the ride is wild, they feel safe not because the ride is smooth, but because of who's with them. That's what trust looks like. Life will have its twists. The path will curve unexpectedly. But when your hand is in God's, you can say, I may be crazy, but I'm not afraid because I trust the one holding me. A woman I know lost her job unexpectedly. She was a single mother, the sole provider for her kids. For the first few days, she panicked, rightfully so. Bills were due. Her savings were thin. The future looked uncertain. But then she remembered God's promise to be her provider. She took a deep breath, got down on her knees, and said, God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm choosing to trust you. And something shifted. The fear began to loosen its grip. A calm came over her, not because her circumstances had changed, but because her focus had. In the weeks that followed, doors opened she hadn't even knocked on. Friends came through with support. A new job came that was better than the one she lost. And the whole time, she carried herself with a strength and peace that inspired everyone around her. That's what happens when you trust God. Peace becomes your portion. The kind of peace that passes understanding. The kind that makes no logical sense but steadies your soul like an anchor in a storm. Let me tell you this, the enemy doesn't just want to steal your joy or purpose. He wants to steal your peace. Because when you lose your peace, you make decisions out of fear. You speak words out of frustration. You act out of desperation. But when peace fills your heart, you can stand firm, think clearly, and hear God more intimately. I want to encourage you, don't let your peace be tied to what you see. Tie it to who you trust. God is faithful. He's never failed, and he's not about to start now. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. That's not a suggestion, it's a life-changing invitation. We don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to solve every problem or predict every outcome. What we do need is to place our confidence in the God who already sees the end from the beginning. The God who knows what's around the next corner. The God who's already made provision for your needs. That kind of trust doesn't just lead to peace, it leads to rest. Not a rest from effort, but a knowing that says God's got this and he's got me. Maybe you've been feeling anxious lately. Maybe your mind has been racing with worry about your finances, your future, your family. Maybe you've been trying to carry it all on your own, but God is saying today, give it to me. Lay it down. Trust me. And when you do, you're going to feel a weight lift. You're going to sleep better at night. You're going to think clearer, love deeper, and walk lighter. There's freedom and trust. There's peace and surrender. There's power in letting go and saying, God, I don't have to understand everything. I just have to trust you. So next time fear tries to flood your heart, remind yourself who your God is. He's your shepherd, your provider, your healer, your defender. He hasn't brought you this far to leave you now. And when you trust him, peace won't be a fleeting feeling. It will become the foundation you live on. Because trust opens the door to peace. And once that door opens, no fear, no storm, no delay can shut it.